On a sunny morning, Sarah Callahan wakes up with the feeling that everything is in its rightful place. Married to David Thompson, a charismatic and successful man, she believes she has found true love. But as the days go by, something starts to feel off. Why does David take so many business trips? And what about those strange messages on his phone? When Sarah decides to investigate, she has no idea what she is about to uncover. The clues lead her to Columbus, Ohio, where a woman named Jennifer Lawrence and two innocent children reveal a dark side of David's life. How could he have built a second family while Sarah was struggling with infertility? Anguish overwhelms Sarah, who confronts David, but he disappears as if he never existed. The police investigation, led by Detective Michael Lawson, uncovers a web of lies and financial fraud. As the mystery deepens, unexplained deaths begin to occur, leading to a shocking conclusion. What happens when the masks fall and the truth emerges? Get ready, because this is a story of love, betrayal, and crimes that defy imagination. Sarah and David. The perfectly imperfect life. Sarah Callahan and David Thompson were the kind of couple everyone admired. With brilliant careers, she, a renowned architect, and he, a successful executive, they seemed to have it all: a beautiful house, frequent travels, and an enviable social circle. At parties, they were always the center of attention, sharing laughs and stories of their achievements. However, behind this shiny facade, there was a latent desire consuming them: the wish to have children. This dream, which seemed so close, turned into a nightmare when infertility came into play, bringing forth a series of emotional and physical challenges. Sarah and David's struggle to conceive not only distanced them but also began to create cracks in their relationship. David, often traveling for work, seemed to take refuge in professional commitments to escape the pain and pressure that infertility brought. Sarah, on the other hand, felt increasingly alone, dealing with the sadness of medical appointments and treatments that did not yield the expected results. Conversations that were once full of plans and dreams began to wither, giving way to awkward silences and the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The image of a happy and accomplished couple slowly began to crumble. Friends and family, who once saw them as an example of love, started noticing the tension in the air. Sarah felt trapped in a bubble of unmet expectations, while David, in an attempt to maintain the appearance of a solid relationship, hid his own insecurities. The perfect life they projected to the outside world was, in fact, a mask they both wore to cope with internal pain and frustration. As David's trips became more frequent, Sarah began to wonder if she really knew her husband. He seemed increasingly distant, and his excuses for his absences started to sound hollow. Over time, the feeling that something was wrong intensified. Sarah, a perceptive and intuitive woman, began to discreetly investigate, trying to understand the reasons behind David's behavioral changes. What she didn't know was that this search for truth would lead her down a dark and unexpected path. The life they had built together, once full of promises and hopes, was now about to be challenged by disturbing revelations. Sarah was about to discover that behind the facade of a solid relationship, there were secrets that could destroy not only her marriage, but also the life she knew. And so, the story of Sarah and David began to unfold, revealing the complexities of love, trust, and betrayal. The discovery of the secret family. Sarah's investigation began to bear fruit when she found documents indicating that David was making trips to Columbus, Ohio, with alarming frequency. Intrigued and distressed, she decided to delve deeper into her research, and with each new clue, her heart raced, mixing hope and fear. After all, what could she find? The truth was a double-edged sword, and Sarah was about to cut the only rope that tied her to the emotional stability she had left. The discovery of David's second family was like a punch to the stomach. Sarah found photos of David alongside a woman who wasn't her, Jennifer Lawrence, and two boys who were clearly his children. The perfect image of the life he had built in Columbus brutally contrasted with the reality she lived in her home. Questions began to swirl like a whirlwind. How could he do this? Why didn't he tell me? What else is he hiding? With the revelation, the emotional impact was devastating. Sarah felt betrayed, helpless, and confused. Every happy memory she had of the couple began to be overshadowed by a new layer of pain. The life she thought she was living with David now seemed like a big lie. The image of the man she loved dissolved before her eyes, and trust, a fundamental pillar of the relationship, was destroyed. The need to confront him became urgent, a search for answers that could no longer be ignored. What followed was an internal investigation that Sarah was not prepared to face. With each discovery, she distanced herself further from the man she thought she knew. The love she felt for him now seemed like a distant echo, suffocated by the lies he had woven around his life. The desire to discover more drove her, but at the same time, she felt trapped in a labyrinth of contradictory emotions. With a heavy heart and a tumultuous mind, Sarah decided it was time to confront David. What she didn't know was that this choice would lead to a confrontation that would change their lives forever. The hidden truths were about to be exposed, and what seemed to be a solid relationship would turn into an emotional battlefield. The confrontation with David, Sarah decided she could no longer live in uncertainty. With her heart racing, she planned the confrontation with David. Her mind was full of questions and emotions on the surface, as she knew this encounter could change everything. That night, as David prepared for yet another business trip, Sarah confronted him. The words flowed like an overflowing river, laden with pain and indignation. She wanted to know why he had lied, why he had created a second life without her knowing. David, caught off guard, tried to deny the accusations, but the evidence was clear. Sarah was not willing to accept lies and evasions. The tension between the two increased with each second, and Sarah's frustration exploded into tears. The love that once united the couple was now being consumed by a storm of betrayal and hurt. What should have been a conversation to clarify things quickly turned into a heated argument, full of shouts and tears. At that moment, David revealed a side Sarah had never seen. He seemed lost, a man cornered by his own choices. The excuses he offered were empty, and the truth was right in front of her. David had built a parallel life, and his denial only deepened the wound. What began as a search for answers turned into a confrontation of emotions, where love and betrayal intertwined painfully. The tension reached its peak when David, faced with the revelation that Sarah knew about his secret life, disappeared from home. The decision to walk away was an unexpected blow to Sarah, who was paralyzed between anger and sadness. The man she loved not only lied, but was now fleeing from his responsibilities. The feeling of abandonment began to infiltrate her heart, and doubts haunted her. Sarah was left alone, surrounded by a whirlwind of emotions. The search for answers had now become an internal struggle between the love she still felt for David and the betrayal that tore her apart. His disappearance left a void echoing in her soul, and the uncertainty of the future consumed her. What she didn't know was that this story was far from over, and new and dark chapters were about to unfold. The investigation of David with David's disappearance, Sarah found herself immersed in a sea of despair and confusion. The pain of betrayal still pulsed in her heart, but now there was a new concern. Where was he? The authorities were called, and the investigation began to take shape. Detective Michael Lawson, known for his insight, was assigned to the case. He soon realized there was something deeper behind David's disappearance, something that could be much more than just a man running from his responsibilities. As Michael delved into David's life, he discovered a web of lies and frauds that extended far beyond the man's personal life. David's financial records revealed a series of suspicious transactions that raised red flags. What seemed to be a successful executive hid a dark side, and connections to financial fraud began to unravel. The detective realized David was involved in a Ponzi scheme, deceiving people and diverting money in an elaborate way. With each new discovery, David's image became more nebulous. The man who seemed to have a perfect life was actually leading a double existence, where professional success was built on the lies he himself created. The investigation revealed he not only deceived Sarah but also a series of investors who trusted him. The consequences of his actions were about to be revealed, and the pressure on David increased every day. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to seek answers, now in a scenario where David's lies unfolded into a much larger panorama than she could have imagined. The pain of betrayal mixed with the anger of having been deceived for so long. The search for understanding became an obsession, and Sarah was willing to face any truth that emerged. Escalation to murder as the investigation deepened. New crimes began to surface. A colleague of David, Simon Reeves, was found dead under suspicious circumstances, and the murder of Emma Thompson, David's sister, further heightened tensions. The connection between these events and the financial frauds was unclear, but Detective Lawson knew there was a thin line linking all these tragedies. The situation was becoming increasingly serious, and FBI intervention was no longer a distant possibility, but an urgent necessity. The pressure was mounting, and Sarah found herself in a sea of confusion and sadness. As if the betrayal of her husband wasn't enough, now she had to deal with the possibility that David was involved in something much darker. Questions piled up in her mind. What else had David hidden? What was the true extent of his lies? And most importantly, was she safe? The feeling that dangers were closer than ever made each day more distressing. With the expansion of the investigation, the FBI began to view David not just as an unfaithful husband, but as a potential criminal. Sarah's life was in chaos, and each new piece of news left her more devastated. She had not only lost the husband she knew, but was now grappling with the reality that he could be responsible for heinous crimes. The pieces of this puzzle were becoming increasingly complex, and the truth seemed more distant than ever. The unveiling of David's double life. As the investigation progresses, David's double life begins to be laid bare, revealing a web of lies he carefully constructed over the years. Sarah, still in shock after the revelations about the second family, finds herself forced to confront not only the emotional betrayal but the reality that her husband was living a parallel life. While David presented himself as a loving husband and dedicated father, in Columbus, Ohio, he played a completely different role. This duality was not just a matter of infidelity, it was a true game of two lives, where every detail was meticulously planned to prevent the two realities from crossing. The evidence Sarah discovers is not just photos or messages, but a complex network of interactions involving not only David but also the woman he chose to be the mother of his children in another city. The tension grows as Sarah realizes this parallel life was not an isolated mistake, but a pattern of behavior David maintained, almost like a second identity. Detective Michael Lawson, responsible for the investigation, begins to gather information corroborating this double life, revealing that David not only maintained two families, but also developed a system to ensure both parties remained completely unaware of each other. With each new discovery, the emotional impact on Sarah becomes increasingly heavy. The pain of betrayal is amplified by the fact that David not only deceived her, but also created an alternate world that undermined the trust she placed in him. The revelation that David had children with another woman is not just an emotional blow, it's a constant reminder that her hopes for a family future became an illusion. The images of the children in Columbus, smiling and playing, starkly contrast with Sarah's loneliness and frustration as she struggles to understand how the man she knew could be capable of such duplicity. As Detective Lawson delves deeper into the investigation, new details emerge, revealing that David used a complex fraud scheme to support the two families. The money he earned was not just the result of his work, but of a cunning Ponzi scheme he had set up to finance his double life. This generates a new layer of indignation in Sarah, who begins to question not only David's loyalty, but also his intentions. The despair of knowing that her husband not only deceived her emotionally, but also exposed her to financial risks transforms her grief into a desire for justice. This new phase of the investigation reveals that David was not just living a lie. He had built a house of cards that now threatened to collapse. David's double life was not just a matter of betrayal, but a reflection of a deeply dysfunctional personality that thrived on secrets and deceit. Sarah, now determined to seek answers and justice, finds herself on a path of no return, where each revelation takes her deeper into a maze of lies she never imagined existed. As if that weren't enough, the discovery of David's double life has implications beyond what Sarah could imagine. The investigation into David's secret life begins to affect other people involved, including friends and colleagues who, even unknowingly, were drawn into the whirlwind of lies. With each new piece of information revealed, Sarah realizes that David not only betrayed her trust, but also built a web of deception that encompasses more than just his two families. And so, the search for truth becomes a personal mission, a battle for dignity, and the recovery of her own life. Police investigation and financial frauds with the revelation of David's double life. The police investigation led by Detective Michael Lawson takes on a new dimension. The focus now is not only on understanding the emotional betrayal, but also on the complex financial frauds David orchestrated. Lawson, experienced and insightful, realizes that David's lies extend far beyond what Sarah could imagine. The Ponzi scheme he set up not only deceived investors, but also sustained his double life, feeding a cycle of deceit that seemed endless. As Lawson and his team begin to piece things together, it becomes clear that David had an undeniable talent for manipulating people and situations. He not only deceived those closest to him, but also used a respectable professional facade to attract investors. The detective discovers that many who trusted David were friends and colleagues, which makes the betrayal even more bitter. Each testimony collected reveals more about how far David was willing to go to keep his lies alive. The evidence of financial frauds accumulates, and the investigation team discovers an alarming pattern. The funds that should have been invested in legitimate ventures were, in fact, diverted to sustain his luxurious lifestyle and the maintenance of his two families. Lawson, relentless in his pursuit of justice, begins to trace the trail of money, linking fraudulent transactions to offshore accounts and shell companies. This revelation not only confirms the extent of the frauds, but also indicates that David had meticulously planned his double life, as if he was always one step ahead. As the investigation deepens, Lawson realizes that David's financial frauds are not just an isolated crime, but part of a broader scheme that may have connections to organized crime. This increases the gravity of the situation, as it is now not just about a cheating husband, but a man who may have put many lives in danger. The ramifications of his actions begin to unfold, and each step forward in the investigation reveals a new level of complexity that challenges the very notion of trust and loyalty. Meanwhile, Sarah, who initially thought David's betrayal was her biggest concern, finds herself in an emotional whirlwind upon discovering that her husband was not just a traitor, but a white-collar criminal. The weight of disillusionment becomes unbearable, and each new revelation makes her question the years she spent with David, leading her to a state of confusion and anguish that seems endless. The search for answers transforms into an urgent need to find purpose amidst the chaos David's life created. Lawson's investigation is not limited to exposing David's double life, but also seeks to understand the why behind his actions. The detective wonders, what drives a man to create such an elaborate web of lies and frauds? As the pieces of the puzzle come together, it becomes increasingly evident that David was not just an ordinary man. He had become a prisoner of his own lies. And so, the quest for truth continues, with Sarah and Lawson determined to unravel the complex web of deceit David had woven over the years. And so, the story of Sarah and David reaches a shocking turning point. The life that seemed perfect crumbled in an instant, revealing the layers of lies David constructed. But how to deal with the betrayal and pain of discovering that the person you loved had a completely different life? The weight of the revelations becomes even more intense with police involvement and the escalation of violence. What could have gone through David's mind as he tried to escape his own traps? And what about the families impacted by his selfish decisions? With ongoing investigations and secrets being unearthed, the question remains, how far can someone go to maintain a lie? And more importantly, how will these now shattered lives find a path to recovery? As these questions linger in the air, it's impossible not to feel the tension surrounding each new development. What would you do if you were in Sarah's place? And what would be the consequences of a life filled with deceit? Share your thoughts in the comments and stay with us for more stories that challenge human understanding. The truth can be stranger than fiction, and we will be here to explore it together.